Welcome to the next episode of the VYPEU podcast. I'm your host, Robert Gonsolin, along here with Will Turbach and Tinley Kane. We're coming off of what you might call a bye week, as in we did not record in about a week or so, but we're coming back with a hot round of games for this episode. Will, you want to just jump right into it?
Yeah, District 23 has been great this year, and for all intents and purposes, the game between Pearland Dawson and Shadow Creek this past Friday was the championship game. It went into overtime. The field goal kicker, Carter Brown, hit a 27-yard field goal for Dawson, got the win. Pearland Dawson is on their way to be the top seed in District 23.
This is so interesting. This was his only field goal attempt of the game, and star running back Jaden Stewart ran for 84 yards and scored 3 touchdowns on the ground. The Eagles win District 23 with a perfect score, or a perfect record of 9-0, joining only 14 teams in Texas who are undefeated.
I mean, as for talking about Shadow Creek, they're going to fall to the third best spot in the district. They'll be behind Pearland. Meanwhile, in that district, the last playoff spot is going to go to Jesuit, who secured that playoff berth with a 37-0 win over Elsick on Thursday night.
Yeah, Strake Jesuit had a really tough start to their season. They played all 3 of those teams very early on. They had Elsick and Taylor and some of the weaker teams in that division. Later on in the season, it looks like they're going to come back and be the 4th team in the District 23.
But going back to Dawson, you said, well, that they looked like a pretty talented team at the start of the season.
Yeah, I saw a game very early in the season from Dawson. I believe it was the first or second week, and I said, Shadow Creek was probably the favorite to win this division just because of how well they've done in 5A, but it's a whole different ballgame in 6A. And Dawson had a great year last year, and this is just a huge improvement.
Moving on to the city of Austin, we had a historical rivalry game played this past weekend. The game itself wasn't very good as for both teams, but it was pretty lopsided. We had Austin Westlake beating Austin High by a score of 62-0. Will, Tinley, anything to add on that?
I mean, talk about a blowout for Austin Westlake. I mean, the Chaps quarterback, Cade Klubnik, had a monster game, putting up 263 yards in the air, 17 completions, and 3 total touchdowns. And the senior running back for the Westlake was Zane Miners, who ran it in for 3 scores.
Yes, the Chaps have got another game against Del Valle this Friday. The game against Lake Travis did get called off. That was supposed to be, as I said, this Friday. So let's talk about Westlake for a second. We had Michael Taff on our last episode, and we were talking about how amazing that defense is. The most points they've given up in a game, I believe, is 13.
Wow.
They shut Austin High out again, so... I
mean, this is definitely a team to keep out an eye for during the playoffs. I mean, I will definitely be interested in watching how their whole playoff run goes this season.
Westlake will most likely go Division II like they did last year, where they won the state championship. I'm assuming that they're not going to have any trouble going that far again this year.
I know for sure not. I mean, like, can Michael Taffy get another defensive MVP of the game?
On his senior year.
Yeah, I mean, going back to back, that's pretty big. I mean,
maybe back to back.
He has a good shot.
Yeah, we're thinking about some just great players in 6A that have already been awarded before. We're talking about guys like Demetrius Davis, who we're going to talk about again. There's been some guys in that class of 2021 that are really going to have a lasting legacy. Well,
even like Demetrius Davis, he's working on getting that 3-peat this year. His sophomore year in 2018, MVP in the state game, I believe. I know he was the starting quarterback, and then last year, obviously, he was the MVP. Maybe again that third time, going in for a third time again.
Yeah, I think so. VYPE cover man. He's a lot of people know his name. So let's go ahead and talk about that game. North Shore beat C King 47-21. C King's quarterback, who I saw early in the season, Cameron Kinchion, he threw for 142 yards. He also had a touchdown. He got a pick in there. It's a really tough defense. It's one of the best all-around teams in the state, and some would say in the country. He's got some Ivy League offers. The last time I checked, he had a 4.82 GPA.
Okay.
Yeah, he's
talk about a big-time student athlete, to say the least.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. He grew up in the Humble area.
Yeah, but North Shore will go on to face Atascocita this week to decide the winner of District 21. That's a very tough district. I'd say it's probably the hardest district in all of Texas, regardless of classification. They have North Shore and C King, like we said, both playoff teams from last year. Westbrook, Atascocita. Also, not to mention that some other talented teams in the bottom half, Kingwood and Summer Creek, I believe. Summer Creek is in that district?
Yeah, we were talking about this district earlier, and just with the realignment and everything, that has got to be not only the best division in the Houston area, and I know calling Westbrook East and area is kind of a stretch, but in the whole state, and
The
you
whole
look,
state.
and you look at other states just in the country that have cities that are this talented, with teams like North Shore and Atascocita. This may be the best district in all of high school football.
Well, think about it. North Shore, 2 years in a row, 6A Division I state champs. 2018, you had Westbrook go to the 6A Division II state championship. They lost to Longview. They made it pretty far. They made it to the second round of the playoffs last year. Atascocita made it far in the postseason as well last season. CE King is a playoff-like team. So much talent in that district.
I mean, that is some good, healthy competition for each of those teams consistently. We're trying to one-up each other. Segueing into a different district, we have Cypress Bridgeland beating Cypress Falls to 41-0. I think it's so interesting, though. Here, this team is, or not even this team, but like this school has only been around for 4 years. But it's become so dominant, and I just think it's so fascinating. Within 4 years, it's collectively like earned its way to becoming the 6A district champions.
Yeah, like, have you ever like just taken note of like these newer schools in the state of Texas, like Bridgeland, like you're talking about, Shadow Creek, Tompkins? They're able to come back after about maybe 4 or 5 years. Like this is Bridgeland's fourth year, you said?
Yeah,
fourth year. After about that length of time, they're already able to like get so good just because like everyone's on board with this new program and what they have in football and all sports in school.
I mean, I don't know, like, I guess zoning would come into an issue here, but, like, the fact that some athletes are willing to transfer out of, like, a different school going into a new school that has no program reputation whatsoever, I think it goes to say a lot about these athletes. Like, the quarterback for Bridgeland is a dual sport athlete. He's dominated the field for football. He's probably going to dominate for baseball as well. I mean, that's so interesting about how like such a young school can be so dominant.
I just think everyone wants a piece of the hype, you know?
I mean, I guess so, yeah. I mean, like that goes to show with like Tompkins and whatnot, how that school had no name whatsoever. Who knows where Jalen Milrow could have ended up, but he's created a dynasty for that team for itself.
Yeah, and you were talking about zoning and where players go. Another guy that we're talking about with that is Kyron Jones. Plays for Shadow Creek. He's down there in Manville. Josh Coltrane, I know, he now plays at Purdue. So I believe he was a freshman at Manville. He ended up going to Shadow Creek, started as a sophomore, won a few state championships, or won a state championship and was runner-up in another one for 5A. And he's going to replace Weaver at Baylor next year.
Yeah, Kyron Jones has been leading the Sharks for this is his second year as a starter, I believe.
It's his third year.
Third year as a starter.
He was a runner-up in 5A as a sophomore.
That's right. In 2018, as a sophomore, he lost to Highland Park in the state championship. Last year, he was able to finally get that ring over Ryan, and now he's in his senior year, still dominating for the Sharks.
Well, we had some huge games to talk about from the past week, and we've got a huge recruiting story. A guy that was once, very recently, the number one recruit in all of the class of 2022. He's number one in Texas, and he's the number one quarterback. Quinn Ewers was once committed to the University of Texas until a couple weeks ago. He said he wanted to explore his options, and a lot of people, like ourselves, kind of suspected that he was going to commit to the Ohio State University, and what did he do?
He did commit there. He did commit there. I think it's so funny. We're really good at our predictions. I would like to credit us for that. Sounds like another quarterback that we know who was once committed to UT. Then ultimately decided that wasn't the most ideal program for him. I mean, we wish them all the best, but he ultimately decided that Alabama was the best choice for him. He wants to explore other options like that. We're talking about Jalen Milrow here, but like, I'm just so curious about like what are the factors that play into this for like these two dominant quarterbacks to ultimately decide step back from UT and want to explore something else.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at UT. Big 12 is probably, if not the weakest, the second weakest of the Power 5 conferences. And I think guys want to go into the SEC or the Big 10. You're going to have more television games. You're going to get more media attention. You play quarterback at Ohio State, and if he's not the starter freshman year, he will be the starter his sophomore year, I'm sure. I mean, obviously Fields will be gone by then. He'll be gone in a couple of months. So what's the decision making here? Like, why Ohio State over UT? Robert, I know you have something to say.
First off, I don't think the Big 12 is a bottom two conference out of the Power 5, but that's a different conversation. We're here to talk about high school sports and recruiting. I just think that these two quarterbacks deciding to just explore their recruiting a little bit more is a result of seeing what other schools have to offer and what they haven't yet experienced in the recruiting process. I think that Quinn, like he said, wanted to do, like you said also, wanting to explore his recruitment a little more in depth. I think that there were some aspects that other teams he didn't look at more closely that he wanted to see and wanted to figure out, like, what can I get out of going to this school. You see Ohio State, they've produced a lot of talented quarterbacks. Take 2014, for instance, not too long ago, it's about 6 years ago. They won the very first college football playoff. They had, in their first string, they had Braxton Miller. Then he did great for them, but he got hurt. And they had J.T. Barrett play the majority of the season. He gets hurt. Boom. They bring in their third string quarterback in Cardale Jones. You think, wow, okay, our season's hopes are over. He wins the conference championship. Then he wins the Sugar Bowl, and then he wins the Natty.
Yeah, but what if any of those guys, with all due respect, Ohio State has not been great at producing pro quarterbacks, and Quinn Ewers is considered as a pro-style quarterback. So,
I mean, not to mention, though, recently Joe Burrows just did get hurt. At one point, he was at Ohio State. He ultimately did transfer to LSU, was their leading quarterback to win the national championship for them last year, but, he got hurt. Who's to say, he comes back the same? It's a very minor injury for him, but, that's something still to take into account.
And we're assuming, Justin Fields, who was once one of the top recruits in the nation, ended up at Ohio State when Urban Meyer was still there, but now Ryan Day is the leader there. And we're assuming that Justin Fields will end up being a pretty great pro quarterback.
I assume so. There's also Dwayne Haskins, who's sitting behind Alex Smith right now on the depth chart. But you never know how his career will turn out to be. I've heard he's a pretty talented quarterback. I just think that it will take us looking into the future and seeing how these quarterbacks will play out, and that will kind of change our view on Ohio State's quarterbacks and how they do in the pros.
I'm just curious, the question, we're all talking about expanding or being curious about other opportunities these people have offered to them, opening up the recruiting process. They're committing to other schools. They're not decommitting and just being open to anything. They're going to other schools saying, I am dedicated, I'm going to hopefully sign with these people, because they're not just waiting around for more offers. Surely they can collect offers while they're committed to one school, but what is it saying? They're opening up to the recruiting process, but not necessarily, because they have a short period of time that they're not committed anywhere else, and then very quickly commit to a bigger school ultimately.
I think that has to do with success in the schools that they have offers from. Take Demetrius Davis, for instance, North Shore starting quarterback, for those who don't know. He was committed to Virginia Tech for a while. Then he decommitted, but recently afterwards he committed to Auburn. Auburn's been doing, the past couple of years they've been doing well in college football. Virginia Tech is in the ACC. All credit to them. But it looks like Auburn just has seen more success. I think they want to be a part of that success and hopefully just make a greater name for themselves by being on those bigger teams.
Yeah, obviously, let's just assume nothing was written down that he was going to go to University of Texas. It's verbally. He's class of 2022. He's got a whole year to decide. But let's just be honest. He was probably talking to other schools when he was said to be committed to University of Texas. And when you get schools like Ohio State, like Penn State, Florida, Georgia, I'm just going down the list right now, LSU, you wonder if you're going to do a lot more on those teams than you will with a school like the University of Texas, who hasn't won a national championship in years and years.
Especially on teams with an offense where you can utilize your best talents. I think Ohio State is a place where Quinn Ewers can definitely throw the ball a lot. Not that he can at any of his other schools, but I think it's just something that it's a style of offense that will fit his play better.
And I think with Jalen, Nick Saban's been one guy to produce extremely successful athletes or quarterbacks that go into the NFL. And I think he wants to go somewhere that's going to push him even more to the next level and ultimately just hone in his ability with being a quarterback himself. I think honestly, it's a smarter move for him to go to a school like Alabama. But no shame against the University of Texas whatsoever. They're a great school. I just think these athletes need a program that's going to just push them to exceed their limits.
And I'd just like to say that we are so excited that within the span of 2 or 3 years, there will probably be a starting quarterback from Texas at Alabama, Auburn, and Ohio State. And there's many more. We know Baylor and a few more. So
that just goes to show how powerful Texas high school football is.
No, you're right. Over quarantine for a little bit, a lot of those NFL players were going which was pretty funny, but and interesting. A lot of those NFL players were going over a debate on, oh no, Texas high school football is so much better than California football or Florida football or Georgia. All these players you see, they were getting in feuds over, just fun feuds over like, oh no, Texas would destroy Georgia in a football game. Like players bred from these different states. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I think Florida probably gets it, not overall, but with defensive backs and wide receivers. But Texas has had some great wide receivers recently. Jalen Waddle will probably be a first-round pick. Obviously, he's out for the whole year now.
Will that take
will
that take an effect on like how his draft will go? I mean, like it was a pretty serious injury. Like, will that have any backlash?
I think he'll be a second rounder now.
And he still has another year of eligibility.
He does, yeah. You're totally right. He can definitely play another year at Alabama. He's been one of the leading factors as to why they're so dominant. So interesting. It wasn't one of his top schools at one point whenever I attended school with him. So it's just interesting how he at one point wasn't considering Alabama, but has been one of their best players so far.
Well, do you think he's going to use that extra year of eligibility?
I realistically don't see that. I think he wants to go into the draft with 2 other players that he was with playing at Episcopal, Marvin Wilson and
Walker Little,
yes, exactly. So I think he wants to just join them and be drafted alongside his Episcopal alums.
Now, Walker Little, he's not playing this season. He is actually taking the year out too. And in the midst of COVID, it's been a crazy year for everyone. I think he's taking this year to focus on the draft. But I heard somewhere that, and not to knock Walker Little or anything, very talented player, I heard somewhere that offensive line is one of the few positions in the game of football where, in terms of missing a year to go to the draft, that might hurt you. As for like if you play offensive line, I think it's that you just need that experience, that consistent experience in the trenches every single year, and to miss a year, I've just heard that it might affect how you play.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty talented draft class for offensive linemen. Excuse me. Penny Swell out of Oregon, I think he's considered a top draft pick, and Little will probably be up there somewhere. And we were talking about Jalen Waddle and if he's going to come out or not. And I think with all credit to guys that stay for all 4 years and get their degree, it's very hard to pass up that first round, second round money.
I totally agree. I mean, like he's definitely talented enough to be drafted this year, and I think he could easily be one first, second round. So I think why not go for it? I mean, you always can fall back on that 4-year degree program, but he's not that type of person to do so. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on this whole matter. But I mean, I'm curious to see what ultimately happens.
Yeah, well, we usually don't talk about college football and pro football and stuff like that, so we really hope that you enjoyed this part, and we still have some predictions coming up.
That's right. We have some great games playing on Friday, especially in District 21. Like we said, arguably the toughest district in the state. The 4 teams that look like they're going to go to the playoffs from this district are actually all playing each other. Starting off, we have Atascocita taking on the 2-time reigning champions of 6A North Shore. Who do we have?
This is going to be a home game for Atascocita, and they've had a really strong year. Obviously, that's a tough district to even be 500 or above when you're playing North Shore, Westbrook, and City King every year. And I think Atascocita is a great team, and they may make a deep run in the playoffs depending on who they play in the first couple of rounds. But I think home field advantage means nothing when you're playing North Shore. They're going to get the win here.
I definitely agree with you on that one. I mean, I think Atascocita ultimately is one of those teams that you face in the playoffs, in your playoff run, that give you a run for your money. Not necessarily, though, a team that should be... I mean, no shame in Atascocita. I'm not trying to bash them any which way. I just think they're just not that team up to North Shore's caliber that should be worthy of heading towards the state championship.
I'm going to go with North Shore as well. I just think that a super dominant team. They have a great quarterback who's going to go play at Auburn next year. I got to go with the Mustangs.
Yeah, and just a little note, ESPN is showing IMG games just about every week here, and we're so happy that we have the honor of covering North Shore just because we're so close. But I'd like to see some more national coverage of maybe a top 10 team, maybe the second best team in the nation.
We need to show Texas some love.
We do.
I get it. Florida people are kind of cool, but we need to show our fellow Texans some love here. And going into a different game, we have Westbrook versus CE King. What do you guys have? This
is more of a matchup that I'm half and half about. Westbrook, they've definitely proven a lot in the past 2 seasons. They haven't been playing like they've been playing recently this season, but CE King is also a very good team. I'm going to have to go with, this is harder than I thought, but I'm going to go with CE King just because I feel like Westbrook's not playing it as great as they usually are. CE King's playing a lot better. We're going with CE King.
Yeah, I've watched both of these teams in the past few years. I got to see CE King up close in the first week of the year for Straight Jesuit. That game was a blowout. I did a little more research on Cameron Kinchion. He's got some offers, like we said earlier in the show, from just about everywhere. Some smaller schools. CE King is not a team in this district that you're thinking about. You're thinking about those other 3, Tennessee, North Shore, and Westbrook. And I still think the teams are letting their guard down against them. And if they don't win the district, obviously they're not going to win the district this year, but I think that's a team with Demetrius Davis gone, with Tastacita and Westbrook, losing some of their seniors. I think CE King will have a chance to be one of the premier teams in the state, and they're going to win this game tomorrow night.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, transitioning into a different game, going into the Cypress area, we have 2 teams worth the competition. I think this is going to be an interesting game, to say the least. We have Bridgeland versus Scifir. Note, Scifir's won state championship a couple years back. Bridgeland's on the come up. It's only been, like we said earlier, this is its 4th year being a school. I think ultimately though, I think Scifir should take the win on this. What do you guys believe?
Yeah, I'm still kind of very iffy on who I should choose because I think this is honestly the best game. I think the game of the week it should either be Bridgeland Scifir, the one we're talking about right now, or Atascocita North Shore. But anyways, for this game, Scifir is a great running back, LJ Johnson. Bridgeland beat Shadow Creek. I just think Scifir, they've been dominant for years now, and I don't think anything's really going to stop them in their path. I got Scifir.
Yeah, I mean, Bridgeland has nothing to play for at this point. They won their district. Really, the only thing they do have to play for is going undefeated. And I'm not sure, heading into the playoffs, how much does that mean? You want your guys to be rested, but you want to keep them out there somehow. I do think they'll keep.
I mean, yeah. Do you want to risk an injury playing a team like Scifir? I mean, I think it's a smart move for them to just lay back a little bit on this game. It's not anything. If they want to keep an undefeated record, that's cool for them. But I think the smarter move is to just take it down a notch a bit. Take the first L of the season, nothing harsh, and just keep going on.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think even if they keep their starters out, you never know what's going to happen. We've seen some major upsets this year that maybe they still win this game with a lesser team that they go out with every Friday. But I'm going to take Scifir in this one either way.
I mean, Bridgeland's only the past 3 weeks. They haven't played anybody that's been a tough competition for them. So I think Scifir will give them a run for their money. They will kind of shock them a bit. I mean, their offense, their defense isn't ready for something as strong as Scifir. So this will be interesting to watch for them and see how they handle a tough competition like the Bobcats.
Let's head to an area of Texas that we don't really predict too much, but Dallas. We have a big matchup. DeSoto, big-time program, taking on Duncanville, who's been to state in the past 2 seasons, and they've lost both times to North Shore.
Yeah, I know DeSoto and Duncanville, those are 2 teams that don't get a lot of coverage just because they're not in that Houston market or in that Austin market. They get a lot of coverage, and although we do cover Dallas teams a lot, I think these are 2 of the most underrated teams in the state, and Duncanville has looked amazing, as always. But actually, I'm going to say another upset here. DeSoto is going to win this one.
I've actually heard that Duncanville looks the best they've looked out of this season and the past 2 seasons where they've gone to state. I heard they're very hungry, and didn't they play pretty well against IMG.
I think that was a much closer game than people expected.
So I gotta go with Duncanville on this one.
Ooh, is this where we're like opposing sides? First game, interesting. I'm gonna have to go with you, Robert. Well, I think this will definitely take Duncanville for the win against DeSoto. I mean, yeah, I've heard all good things about Duncanville. That'll be interesting to watch.
And finally, let's head into our last matchup. Sterling taking on Fort Bend Marshall. Fort Bend Marshall is undefeated in 5A. Who do we have?
Yeah, 5A. I love talking about smaller schools like that. Marshall is always a dominant team, and they don't have to worry about Shadow Creek this year. So not only are they going to have an easy regular season, but they will have a much easier path. There are some pretty good teams in 5A, but they're going to have a much easier path this year to another state championship.
I think Marshall should possibly take this win. I mean, even though they are undefeated, this shouldn't stop them from taking on collect another win for their season.
I gotta go with Marshall too. I think they want to get that state championship that they've been looking for, and they want the state of Texas to just know who they are. I think that by beating Sterling, they stay on that playoff momentum before they head into the playoffs, and I just think that they're going to take this one over Sterling. Before we wrap things up, let's talk a little bit more about 5A. 5A, unlike 6A, you're in Division 1, you're in Division 2, whereas in 6A, you don't know until how the standings play out and which division you're going to go into. Highland Park has been a dominant 5A team for many years now. Marshall has been in the past couple of years has been on the come up. Who do you think is the best team in 5A? Do you think I think it's between Marshall and Highland Park. I gotta go with Marshall with how they're playing.
I'd have to agree with that. I mean, like you said, they're undefeated. They don't have to worry about Shadow Creek anymore. I think this should be a solid run for them this year for 5A. I'm so curious to see how they handle state this year.
Yeah, I mean, Highland Park is a great school. I know they had some game canceled early in the season, and obviously those teams are both going to go very far. But the way that we've seen Marshall play, one of the more underrated teams in the Houston area and that Fort Bend district, and I think, all props to them. They're going to win the state championship this year.
Well, that wraps up our podcast for today. We thank you for coming in and listening to us. We hope to have a special guest come in next week, but that wraps up what we have. I'm Robert Gonsolin, along here with Will Turboff and Tinley Kane. Thank you very much.